You're listening to the Himal Southasian podcast, Partitions of the Heart, Conversations with Harsh Mander. This is Season 1, Muslim Life and Death in Modi's India. Follow the Himal Southasian podcast channel on your podcast app to find all the episodes as they are released. You'll find us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts, where you can share, rate, and review us. Visit our website himalmag.com and support our work by becoming a Himal patron today. Follow us to follow the conversation.
Salam, Namaste, Zindabad, friends. I welcome you to one more episode of podcast series which I've called Partitions of the Heart, Reflections on India's Republic. This season is devoted to the question of the crisis of India's Muslims. I'm Harsh Mander. I'm doing this with Himal, South Asia. Himal is an extraordinary publication that has looked at South Asia beyond the borders that we have drawn over the last decades, often amidst much bloodshed. In today's episode, I'm delighted to speak with somebody who I regard to be one of the most nuanced, sophisticated, original, thoughtful social scientists thinking about the Muslim problem in India. Hilal Ahmed, who works with the Center for the Study of Developing Societies. Hilal, in his recent book, speaks out his own positionality, and he says that I'm a practising Muslim and I'm a scholar, and so he can understand the Muslim experience from within and from without, and you take both those perspectives. Hilal, let's leap into our conversation right away, and thank you for being.
Thank you for having me. Thank you very much.
In your recent book, you start somewhere to say that you grew up in the 1990s in India, in a very rapidly changing India. I grew up in the 60s and 70s in a very different kind of India. My memories of years of my childhood and in college right here in Delhi University and beyond was a time of idealism. If there's one word that would describe those times for me, it was a time where we believed that we would build a better India and a better world. And in the nation building led by Nehru, there was a sense that this was a country that would belong equally to people. It did not matter which God you worship or if you worship no God. You were fully an equal Indian, that this country belonged, needed you, belonged to you. And we would build together a country that was kind, equal, and just. The 1990s was, there was a decline throughout, even from the 50s, but certainly in the 60s, we started seeing the decline. The famous Sahil Ludhianvi's Jinhe Naaz hai Hind par wo kahan hai. That was already in the 50s. He was beginning to speak about the disillusionment. But the real decline, I would say, was in the 1990s.
Absolutely.
And two principal landmarks of changing India. One was the demolition of the Babri Masjid, which many, including me, regard as the most tragic day in India's history after the assassination of Mahatma Gandhi. And then the whole neoliberal economic model, where the socialist egalitarian aspirations of the constitution was simply set aside. In your book, you also very, very nicely speak about the constitution evolving in these difficult times from just a book of rules to, in a sense, the icon of emancipation itself. So I just wanted you to tell our viewers and listeners, what kind of India did you grow up in?
I think to answer, as I said, and you very nicely put, this positionality, I think is very important to emphasize in order to answer that question. Because again, we both are going back to the past.
Yes.
Different past. Your past is obviously when the question of idealism was established as a reference point. And my young past was actually where idealism was completely gone,
abandoned,
and practicality and live in the moment became a reference point for social discussions, even political discussion. First of all, as I said, and you also underlined that in my book, that I don't see any contradiction between my identity as a practicing Muslim and my identity as a professional researcher. And in order to resolve that, I would always like to emphasize on what I called intellectual politics. We all are politicians in some senses, because politics is not a bad thing, but the specificity of that politics must be underlined, and then that would give us a vantage point to revisit the 1990 movement. I make 3 points about it. The first thing is that when I say that I am a Muslim and I am also a researcher, I have to make that transparent while I am doing my research. So my reader should know the process of research in a transparent manner. Second is that I always believe that there should be a principled distance from the communities you work on. So I am a Muslim researcher and I am working on Muslim. It does not mean that I am representing Muslim. I am actually researching on them. And that's the reason why I will always have to have some kind of a principled distance. And finally, the tentativeness of my arguments, that whatever I'm saying today, it does not mean that it is a final truth. It is actually a process of the research which I have done, which is completely transparent for my reader. And in all my books, I have tried to maintain that who am I, and what I am going to do in this, what are my questions, what is my method, and what my answers are. So therefore, the tentativeness of my answers. So if, these 3 principles of intellectual politics always help me to create a context-specific equilibrium between my identity as a Muslim and my identity as a researcher. Now, if that is the vantage point, then going back to 1990s is important, because 1990 was the time when old dreams became somehow irrelevant, but
almost discredited, I think.
Yes, discredited. But at the same time, there was also a positive trend evolving, and that is that you need to evolve new positions, especially in progressive circles. For example, we started recognizing caste, we started recognizing gender, and most importantly, we also started recognizing religion as an important force, especially after the demolition of Babri Masjid. In that context, new ideas, not ideologies, were actually trying to get certain shapes. Unfortunately, what really happened that we did not get time to develop these highly diversified ideas into some kind of a political position. So on the one hand, there was one consensus in favor of market-driven economy, and we did not have any answer to that. We accepted it rather uncritically, that market will regulate itself in the realm of economic sphere. But in the political sphere, Hindutva politics was the only consolidated form of idea that established, and the opponent of Hindutva did not have any concrete set of ideas which they can actually combine and pose as some kind of an alternative to that.
I would go even further. It was not just that they didn't have an alternative set of ideas. They were there already in the constitution. They lacked the conviction.
Yeah, and they were actually, there was a failure to interconnect these.
And to believe in it strongly enough.
Yes.
To fight. And I would also say that neoliberalism we always see it as an economic,
Yes.
but it was also a moral frame.
Yes.
Neoliberalism as a moral frame was that you don't owe anything to anybody, just advance your own interest. But, just linked to the question of religion itself, I think it's important, from the broad left to which I also belong, I think we uh, we should be faulted for having been disrespectful of religious faith.
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
and when I look back at our freedom struggle, the way Maulana Azad, and you said I'm a Muslim and I'm a researcher, he said I'm a Muslim and I'm an Indian, and both those identities cannot be taken away from me. Gandhiji was a deeply practicing Hindu and deeply committed to the respect of every other faith. So religious faith in itself, and and I think you refer to it in your book, there has been a kind of conceit of the left liberal intellectual as the true defender of secularism. And I think, in my experience, if India still is a country that has, is secular in the idea of equal respect for every faith, it is so not because of people of your and my social class. It is because of working class
Absolutely.
Indians
Yes.
who live a life. I mean, recently there was the Kumbh and there was the stampede, and you read about mosques being opened up for the affected persons. I read it and I said, this is still my India.
Yes.
So do you agree with this? And therefore, I notice conspicuously you emphasize that you're a practicing Muslim.
Yeah.
And it's not something that you're defensive about. It's not something that you're aggressive about. But it's there.
Yes.
And that does not shift from your commitment to secular values, democratic values. Would you like to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, that's because the idea of practice is important for me. Because in some sense, I don't call myself Gandhian, but I am Gandhijan.
Yes.
So
Maybe that's a good way to describe
yeah.
myself as well.
So
Yes.
Kumar Prashantji actually used this term Gandhijan. So I think I am Gandhijan. So if that is the case, then my own intellectual trajectory has got something to do with that. I was born in a family which was not very. They were not forcing me to practice religion at one point of time. So very early in my life, I started glamorizing myself as an atheist. But I met a teacher, and he said that if you don't know anything about religion, then you do not have any right to say that you are an atheist. First you learn, and first you read. So I started reading Gandhi as well as Islam around when I was in the 10th standard. And that was the time when Babri Masjid Ram Temple movement was actually started. So on the one hand, I was reading that stuff, and on the other hand, the environment in which I lived was very, very powerfully imposing one kind of identity on me. So I read somewhere in Gandhi that this is my label. I'm being a Muslim is my label. So I'm not going to get rid of this label.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are certain universal values which are there in every religion. So I have to respect all these values. And at the same time, I should think of something called liberation, because by the time I reached college, I get into Marxism. So, and I got great teachers, Manindranath Thakur, who is teaching in JNU these days, Professor Randhir Singh, Professor Manoranjan Mohanty. These were actually Marxists, but they were very sympathetic to the idea of religion. So they encouraged me, and they said there is no harm in you being a practicing Muslim, but at the same time, the idea of liberation was always there. And I remember Manindranath Thakur telling me when I was in my BA first year, he said that all religion actually started as social movement at one point of time. So the idea of religion is to get rid of the dominance of all sort, and not merely materially but spiritually find something that is equal. In all our surveys, not merely the CSDS Lokniti survey but also in the Pew surveys, we usually get this response that India belongs to all. And if you would like to become a good Hindu or a good Muslim, you have to respect other religions. So that is actually still there.
That is still there. I believe that is if there's anything that we can be proud of in our civilizational tradition, both in ancient times and in medieval times with the Sufis, it is this intrinsic respect for every faith.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That I think we are in the risk of losing, both with the assault of Hindutva and this somewhat skewed understanding of progressive politics. Hilal, your most recent publication is about public policy, etc., and you underline that it's not simply through reservations that affirmative action happens. Yeah. You've also said, and I totally agree, that the situation of deprivation that India's Muslims find themselves is not suddenly the outcome of the last 10 years. There has been a steady decline.
Yes.
Now, let me sort of put things in a somewhat different way. Any minority, it's a classical kind of statement, has three natural anxieties. They have an anxiety about identity. Will I be allowed to be myself in my religious faith, my cultural way, what I eat, drink? The second is of security. Will I be safe from violence and discrimination? And the third is anxieties about equity. Will I be able to participate in jobs? Will I be able to access education, healthcare on equal terms? I believe that whereas all these three anxieties definitely exist with the large stream of the Muslim population with all its diversities, my critique is that the leadership of India's Muslims has for the greater part, with exceptions like Maulana Azad and Zakir Hussain and others, the leadership has tended to focus most on identity questions, much less on security questions, and almost not at all on questions of equity.
I completely agree with you.
And symbolically, the one time, and the CA protest was a beautiful moment. I think it was one of the most glorious moments because Hindus and Muslims all came out together to protest something that was against one community. But before this, the only great movement on the streets, and you were of course very young, was the Shah Banu movement, and it was almost that we came onto the streets so that Muslim women should not get equity and protection. So that seemed not only defense of identity, but defense of identity seen from a very skewed patriarchal lens. So is that where we've gone wrong in public policy, but also in our demands as Muslims? How would
Actually, there are two questions, and I would like to start with the first one. First of all, the methodological point. The point is that most of our discussions, especially in last 10 years, focused entirely on the news items which we get to read in newspapers. Yes. Somehow we have stopped looking at the changes introduced by post 2014 Government of India in the sphere of public policy. So public policy is a highly unexplored area. We just know that something called Niti Aayog exists. But what has happened to, say, for instance, such a commission report? In what ways such a commission report is still recognized by Ministry of Minority Affairs and things like that? What are the new programs taken up by Niti Aayog, etc.? So myself, my colleague Nazima Parveen and Sanjeer Alam, we decided to study the changes introduced by the Narendra Modi government in post 2014 period. And the idea was that we should be very honest to the statement that are officially made by the Niti Aayog and other government sources. So on the basis of that, we revisited the question of Muslim marginalization and aspiration. So that is one thing, that's a method which we adopted, and that's why this report that has come out, Rethinking Affirmative Action for Muslims in Contemporary India. going back to, and I completely agree with you, that there was a lot of emphasis on identity question. There was
from
somehow,
a patriarchal lens.
yes, from the patriarchal lens.
Because identity is also the Sufi
Yeah,
traditions and
absolutely.
many others.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then there is much less on security, but virtually nothing on equity.
Yeah.
I would refer to the official position on that, Kaka Kalekar Committee. So Kaka Kalekar Committee emphasized the fact that economic criteria should be taken into consideration while recognizing other backward classes. Now, what was Kaka Kalekar Committee's response to Muslim marginalization? Which is very strange and surprising.
What was that?
They made this point that Islam is an egalitarian religion, therefore, there is no need to think about caste inside Islam. And they said, we know that there are certain castes which are treated like untouchable among Muslims, but we don't see any reason to treat them at par with recognized scheduled caste.
Which is an absurd position.
Which
really.
is an absurd position.
See, because I worked in the districts and I've seen India very closely.
Yeah.
In that, there are the communities, the Hilas, for instance, I saw, were manual scavengers, just like Bhangi and the Valmiki community. There was no difference whatsoever.
No difference at all.
Only difference is that you could go to the mosque.
Absolutely.
But otherwise, there was no difference.
So the equity question must be understood with regard to the question of socio-economic hierarchies among Muslims, or I would say heterogeneity in socio-economic sense. Now that's one. Second is that what is the structure in which we have to approach these questions. So first of all, obviously, there are three administrative categories which we all know: SC, ST, OBC. SC, we know that only Hindu, Baudh and Sikh are entitled to get reservation, but not Christian Muslims, Christian Dalits and
which is a problem.
Dalit Muslims,
which is again
actually a problem.
Saying that those are egalitarian religions and therefore
absolutely. Yeah. Then second is ST. We do have certain Muslim communities in ST list. OBC is a strange category. Obviously, Mandal Commission did a remarkable job when they came out with a formula to identify non-Hindu OBCs. That criteria is still used. But since we do not have any caste census, so we don't know the exact number, only we have in Telangana or in Bihar. So therefore, one of the things which we recognize that this administrative structure must be revisited, and we should actually make a case that reservation must be secularized. So the affirmative action policies or the affirmative action framework we have at the moment is actually not completely secular.
So my friend, this word appeasement, it's a very interesting word used by the Hindutva political to anything that is affirmative action for Muslims is seen as appeasement. L.K. Advani really popularized the term, if you remember. And it was interesting, I think he kept talking about Muslims having been appeased at the expense of the Hindu majority. Dr. Manmohan Singh, I think one of the statesman-like decisions he took was to set up the Sachar committee. And basically in terms of hard economic facts, it laid out that there could have been no appeasement because they're at the two most disadvantaged communities, the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes, Muslims have the same kind of development deficit. Yeah. So in a sense, there was a hope that at least that canard would be buried. But I see with Mr. Modi that this has been revived, and in his last election speech before entering the 2024 elections, he spoke for three evils in this country, and one of them was appeasement, which in a sense was saying that if the state takes any positive action for the protection of, for the advancement or for the equity in a sense of the Muslim minority, it is appeasement, and therefore it should end. How do you see the last 10 years?
I think in order to substantiate what I agree with you, but I think we have to look at the structure in which the whole idea of appeasement and affirmative action are intermingling with each other. Because in our surveys as well as in our report, we find that, and such a commission is a very important document for me as well, especially the methodology they adopted.
Yes.
The methodology was very simple, that there are certain issues which affect all Indians,
Right.
all poor and marginalized. There are certain issues which are actually affecting minorities, religious minorities especially.
Right.
And there are certain issues that are very specific to Muslims. And they argue that we need to actually look at all three together.
Right. No, very good. Yeah.
That is the methodology.
Yeah.
And
I found it very interesting that they always called Muslims a socio-religious group.
Absolutely.
I mean, so they were recognizing that it's not just your religious faith, but
it is
a societal context. Yes.
Yes. And the Constitution, the idea of affirmative action that is given in the Constitution is very secular.
Right.
It says that you have to look at the socio-economic backwardness of any group. And then you provide certain policies. You have to make certain policies for the uplift of that particular socio-economic group.
Right.
Such a commission recognized that. But what has happened in last 10 years, the language of affirmative action has completely changed, which we did not pay attention to. The focus of the debate on affirmative action was entirely in the political sphere.
Right.
But what was happening in the realm of policy, somehow we ignored that. In the realm of policy, first important point which my colleague Nazima Parveen highlighted in her chapters, basically that now the term backwardness is replaced by something called aspiration.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you need to have a positive vocabulary. That's one very important thing. Second, she also found that now there is, and obviously we had this minority concentration district idea, which was there in Sachar, which was adopted by Ministry of Minority Affairs for having.
But with a lot of limitations, because
Absolutely.
because they talked about the district, but not the settlements of.
Yes. So what we find that now there is a new category for affirmative action is created, that's called aspirational district.
Okay.
So obviously the same thing, but in this is a space-centric thing. And what Nazima has done, she has mapped the minority concentration district and the aspirational district, and make an argument that basically there is a great overlap.
Okay.
So the socio-economic backwardness of a district as an important point of departure. So if the state is really very concerned about it, it should continue to adopt that policy framework. One. Secondly, that there is no engagement with the private sector. All the debates on affirmative action revolving around the idea of jobs in the public sector,
which is drying up completely.
Absolutely.
The public sector is largely doing casual recruitment in any case.
Yes. So what about private sector? And there is no engagement. So we have not recommended that there should be reservation in the private sector. What we have recommended that we should open up dialogues. We open up this category and then try to secularize that affirmative action in which all socio-economic backward communities can be accommodated. Now, this framework would naturally going to help all socio-economic marginalized community. Right. There is something which is very specific about Muslim, coming back to your main point, and that is the cultural representation. So one of the recommendation of our work is that there is a need to have the debate on what is the cultural policy of the state. Somehow we do not look at the culture policy, we look at the outcome of the culture policy. When the new parliament was being constructed, there was no discussion on the principles that were adopted in order to represent the Indian parliament symbolically. So the symbols were carefully deleted.
Yeah. So 1,000 years of our history was just deleted.
Just deleted. Yeah. So therefore, the second and most important recommendation which we are going to make is that state must ensure positive representation of Muslim identity. So if the positive representation of Muslim identity is maintained, then the sensitization program, the wider sensitization could happen, and it then would become a point of departure to think carefully about the marginalization question. So if we start with marginalization and pose this question the way Sachar posed at one point of time, the environment is completely changed, and it will be very easy for rightist forces to present it as an appeasement?
Hilal, I mean, I would debate this, but let's put that. I feel we should not accept the terms of discourse that have been laid out by the right. We need to write it.
But I think just to add to this, because I'm not saying that we should, when I say right, right has got two meanings. One is the right in political sense, which is Hindutva. Second is right in the economic sense.
Market, yes.
The market. So the terms of discourse are dominated by the right of the economic type, not the political type. Because political type, rightist politics is actually substantiating the right of the economics, the economic sphere.
There are two sort of examples that I want to place before you. I mean, two specific questions. One is that I have done a lot of work last 20 years with homeless children. But there is a statistic I want to place before you that, say, in a place like Delhi, about half or more of our homeless children are Muslim. So that is reflective. See, why does a child end up on the streets? There's a family breakdown, the child falls. There should be a community support system that breaks down. There should be a state support system that breaks down, and the child ends up on the street. Now, this idea, this observation that almost half our children on the streets after all of these breakdowns are Muslim reflects poverty, but it reflects other breakdowns as well. So this is one, puzzle that I've not been able to understand. The other is something that Christoph Jaffrelot wrote about recently, and that was the decline in Muslim participation in higher education. He said there is no community, including SC, ST, etc., where decade after decade, they've always shown some rise in higher education. But in the last decade, Muslims have actually shown a decline. You need to be familiar. So both of these, I just wanted to throw them out to you because you're a scholar, you've thought about these issues. Where would you say, what is the crises within the community and the way the state has dealt with it, which has led to these breakdowns?
One thing is that we have to look at things in a historical manner. Who are Muslims? And now with Telangana and Bihar, we know that most of the Muslims are basically coming from the most deprived section of society historically. So if you go back, we did not have any statistics, say for example, of Mughal era. But suppose we just go back to the record whatsoever we have with us, we find that actually Muslims were poor even at that point of time. Most of the Muslims. So who the Muslims are, the most poor, most marginalized. That's one. Second is
with about a 10% elite, which is very well off.
Yes, they're very well off. So that is one sociological fact which we must always remember. So that is one thing. Second thing is that without understanding the changes induced by in the economic sphere by the state in last 30 years, we won't be able to understand the equation which you are putting forward. In last 30 years, the question of disparity is completely ignored. Now, this disparity has got socioeconomic impact as well. So, the environment one which lives, because we cannot say that what is happening after 2014 does not have any relationship with, say, for instance, 1991.
Yes.
Because the moment new economic policies came down, they started. The first effect, if you go back to Sachar Commission report, look at chapter 2. Okay. Chapter 2 categorically says that liberalization has destroyed us. But one of the problems with the Sachar Commission report was that they did not look at the data in order to map out the impact of liberalization on Muslims. Okay. This is what we have tried to do in our report. That liberalization was a very important factor, and it not merely if you compare, say for instance, what is happening with Muslims sociologically with what is happening with, say for instance, Dalit in a very particular context, you find great similarities, or the urban poor. Yeah. So, if you look at all these statistics, you find various sort of...
I mean, Muslims constitute the largest self-employed category.
Yes.
There's a sense that there's no point even looking for a job because we'll have to fend for ourselves.
Yeah.
Is that an outcome that you're referring to?
Yeah, because yes. One is that the self-employment.
Yes.
Second is that there was, again going back to Sachar, many people saying that we are basically artisan, and we require some protection from the state. Now the state is saying that you have to compete in an open market situation.
Global open market.
Global open market situation. So the impact would be much higher, and then whatever extra money you are going to earn to create informal network for support system will definitely disappear.
Yes,
so in order to do bit of piecemeal sort of thing, this government introduced that famous program called Hunar or something by Ministry of Minority Affairs. But look at the budget.
Yeah.
It is actually,
like
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. On higher education, would you like to say something?
Yeah,
yes, decline in higher
education. Decline in higher education. Yes. First of all, then you have to look at what is happening at the primary level. My colleague Sanjir Alam has done remarkable work on the relationship between job market and education of Muslims. So his argument, and I'm just repeating his argument, and part of his argument is there in the book which we have recently published, all three of us. He makes this point that at the beginning level, at the primary level, the enrollment of Muslims is much higher.
Okay, yeah.
But when it comes to primary or upper primary, 7th or 8th standard, the dropout rate is equally very, very.
Why?
Because of the pressure, the economic pressure that what a child is going to do. Because the families are not in a position to sustain that. Even in the same socio-economic conditions, you do not find the Muslim families, they had to, obviously there is a lot of pressure on boys to earn at the very early stage. One. Second is that most of the Muslim communities are artisan communities. So, enrollment at the level when the child is 5 or 6, it's fine, they can go, they can work. But after that, it would become very important for the family to bring them back as an additional workforce. Then, it comes to the higher education thing. So caste and class of a person is very important in getting into the higher education thing. It also depends on, and Sanjeev is the best person to answer this question, and he argues that if you look at state-wise, you find that all India level aggregate data certainly will give us one good picture.
Yeah.
But we also have to go back to this at the state level. So we cannot say that the same situation
is everywhere.
So in Kerala, the Muslim participation in higher education is much better than Muslim participation in higher education in UP. One more thing, that is caste and class consideration.
Okay.
Surprisingly, Muslim OBCs are doing better than Muslim upper caste.
Wow, why would that be?
Because the middle caste, if we divide Muslim caste-wise, the middle caste, they somehow recognize the value of education, especially in UP. So I think that's the factor that was recognized by Sachar also. If you revisit Sachar Commission report, you find that in some educational spheres, especially in higher education, I think Muslim OBCs are doing much better than Muslim upper caste.
Hilal, I want to go back. I want to take you to a difficult space and then a little more difficult space.
Sure.
I recall, whenever I documented what is happening to India's Muslims, especially in these last 10 years, one response from otherwise liberal, sympathetic viewers is that the trouble with liberals like you is that you're not talking about problems within the Muslim community. The implication of these observers is that Muslims in the end are facing the problems that they are because they haven't dealt with problems within the community. I have passionately disagreed with this. saying that of course there are problems in the Muslim community, but there are problems in every community.
Yes.
And every community needs to deal with gender inequities, caste inequities, and other kinds of breakdown. But, the last year and a half, I've gone to many parts of the country where people of Muslim identities, I think they feel safe with me, are happy to have closed-door discussions, just trying to understand why are we in this situation. And I've heard one stream coming from within the Muslim community, which also says we are responsible for our situation. So, how do you respond to this idea that Muslims have landed up in this deep crisis that they find themselves today? Because in some way they are responsible for it. How would you respond to this critique, to which I am extremely uncomfortable with?
I think that, I would like to answer this question as a researcher.
Yes.
Not as someone who's a practicing Muslim, because my practicing, but I can certainly answer this from the practice as well. Because as a researcher, if you ask me, then first of all, we have to, as I said, we have to deconstruct the idea of we, who we are. We are talking about 20 crore people, those who are highly diversified, they speak different languages, they belong to different socioeconomic class, caste, etc. And therefore, one must be very careful while talking about, the Muslim.
How do Muslims vote? How do Muslims do this? I find it such a problematic idea.
Absolutely. Second is that if we deconstruct it, then the question is that every social group has got its own specific problems. Now, what I can certainly observe in India, and specifically with regard to religion, the nature, and I have written quite extensively on this, that this is my problem. I am a practicing Muslim, but I find the religion they practice deeply problematic because it is called displayed religiosity. Every religious community would like to display its religion, and that's the reason why the question of religious sensitivities has become very important. That, what are the philosophical foundation of your religion? You are not talking about it. For example, this Gita Mahotsav that happens every year in Kurukshetra, I would like to know how many of them have actually read
the Gita.
I have read it. I know the beauty of it. Or there are many Quran conferences. I would like to know how many of them have actually studied Quran systematically in order to find solution to the problems which they are facing at the moment. So that is the problem of displayed religiosity. Number two problem, that the most important issue which we in India especially facing is the question of disparity. Every religion is all about equality. What is your take on the question of disparity? Coming back to your homelessness wala point, what you are doing with that? So if a child is homeless, then as a Muslim or as a human being, this is my duty to address that problem.
Why are they not anxious about it? We have something like 1 lakh homeless children on our streets in Delhi.
Yes.
Why is it no one's concern? Is my question. So you're saying there are problems in the Muslim community. I agree. There are problems in all our communities. But
having said that, there are, again, going back to, as a researcher, I'll go back to such a commission report. There are certain issues which are actually common to all Indians. And at the moment, that's the reason why I make a distinction between two ways in which Muslimness is expressed in my book. One is the discourse of Muslimness, and second is the substance of Muslimness.
I like that distinction.
Because the discourse, if at the level of discourse, I would completely agree with you. Obviously, there is a discourse created which broadly be called anti-Muslim, because Hindutva is surviving on anti-Muslim discourse. That is the dominant discourse by which
that's the reason for its existence.
But the substantive Muslimness required some serious attention. Caste, class, gender, these issues are important, and therefore we cannot say, usually when Muslims say, the Muslim which you met in various capacity, when they say that we have problem, they are actually referring to the discourse. When I am saying Muslims and every community has have got a problem is actually, I'm talking about the substantive issues. So until and unless we address substantive issues and dealing with them, dealing them from the discourse, only then we would be able to address them systematically. This is not a simple answer.
Yeah, but Hilal, can I still push you?
Sure.
You're still saying there are problems in the Muslim community which need to be addressed, and I totally agree. I'm saying, are people justified in saying that Muslims are facing the crisis today substantially because they haven't addressed these problems? I don't agree with it.
No,
I feel
not
that,
at all.
I feel that it's how the state has dealt with it. It's how majoritarian politics, majoritarian mobilization, and we need to while we need to speak about the need for reform always, we need to recognize that this is something that is being done to Muslims. It's not that something that Muslims have done to themselves. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I completely agree with you.
Yes.
My point is simply this: I won't use the term state. I would use the term political class.
Absolutely.
They have accepted Hindutva as the dominant narrative of politics.
Except the left, I would say that.
Except the left
to some degree.
extent.
To some extent.
Agree. And they have accepted this dominant narrative, and that's the reason why they would like to blame the victim.
Yes.
They have not come out
and absolve themselves.
Absolve themselves.
That's very well put. Hilal, can I now get into the depth of what we are facing today? You would have, as a scholar and as a person of Muslim identity yourself, I'm just appalled at the level of hate and fear that is sort of permeated across our social fabric with a rapidity over these last 10 years. Speaking with people, Muslims across the country, the word I hear most is fear. And a second is a sense of betrayal.
Yeah.
That I thought we belonged. I thought when we talked about this country belonging to equal, we were actually meaning it. But is this who we really are? So how do you, I mean, and here I'm seeing both as, taking off your garments as a researcher, just as somebody who's of Muslim identity, then wearing that garment. How do you see this moment in our history?
Because, when I was in the school in 80s and 90s, I still remember that we were facing the same sort of abuse that was obviously there. It's a bit confused.
Were you the terrorist, or were you the Pakistani, or what
Pakistani.
were you? Okay.
Pakistani. And so these things were, for a common Muslim, is not new. Right. The hate was already there, but it was hidden. What BJP has done
is legitimize
it. They legitimize it, and now they have given a certain kind of language to actually abuse Muslim more directly, right. And the confidence that nobody is going to actually stop you.
I would go a little further. Not only have they normalized hate, they've also valorized it. That you're heroic. Yeah. I mean, you truly love your religion because you hate Muslims so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that is one thing which is there, which I also observe. But when I, and that's why I like your initiative a lot. Two things which I really like. One is that, this Karwan-e-Mohabbat thing.
Yes.
You have to sensitize people at the grassroots. You have to talk to people.
Yes.
Now the sources of this hate. Right. What are the sources of this hate? These are not entirely religious or communal. I would say that there is, if you look at National Crime Bureau data, you find that now the society in which we live, it's highly individualistic. So we have our own individual interests. That's why families are breaking down. People are not concerned about each other. Everybody is interest oriented. And in this context, how would we expect that a Hindu would stand up for Muslim? Until and unless somebody would go and talk about collectivity. So the idea of collectivity is gradually actually declining in its entirety in India at the moment. But then the question of politics is very important and very, very crucial. Why? Because, in our political culture, if you go back to national movement, we did not have this idea that actually people are good and they know everything. In our political history, there was a lot of emphasis on the idea of political education. Somehow we compromised with that. When I say we, it means the progressive forces. Only Hindutva politics had that support system available in the form of RSS. So RSS would go to the bottom level of society, talk to people, and then they would mobilize them, they would communicate the ideas which are going to certainly support BJP in election. But what about nobody has stopped left, nobody has stopped Congress to have Congress at Sevadal. So that space, that social space has completely gone. So you have actually, there is no way in which you can provide some kind of a positive, constructive political education to the people at the bottom level.
I can't agree with you more. In the years that I worked in Gujarat, and I've said this to the top leadership of the Congress, I kept searching, can I find somebody in Khadi who's working among the victims?
Yes.
I couldn't find them in Gujarat. I couldn't find them in Muzaffarnagar. I've not found them in every family of lynching that we've met. They're just not there. The left also has to really introspect. In Bengal, the left got disillusioned. Okay, if I was sensitized enough with the ideology, if I'm disillusioned with the left, I could go maybe even to the Trinamool. I could go to the Congress. I can't go to the BJP. But they've gone wholesale. So my friend Hilal, there's one question that I resolved to ask in every episode of this series. Do you see hope? And if so, where?
There is a lot of hope. One thing which I think also underlined in my book is that at least, and then that idea I really admire. Yogendra Yadav has come out with a brilliant idea. It's called Bharat Ka Swadharma. He has written something on it, not substantially, and I hope that he would come out, and many other such things will also evolve that would provide some kind of a template to oppose what is happening at the moment. So at the moment, if politics always function in binaries, so we have one side which is celebrating nationalism in overtly Hindu terms.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there is a lot of opposition to that. But that opposition has, does not have any name to it. So Bharat Ka Swadharma could be one possible template. There could be many others, but I think we need to work hard on the intellectual side of it. And that is one thing. Second, as I said, your Karwan-e-Mohabbat. Love has got, and going back to Gandhi again.
Yes.
Because Gandhi says that history is all about violence. What about love?
Yes.
So I think we
And you
need to
cannot
go
fight-
a radical politics of love.
Yeah, radical politics of radical love. Yes.
Radical politics of radical love.
Yes.
And I think there is a lot of hope in that. Third is that, coalition making. I think that we have to understand the fact that, reducing everything to electoral politics is not going to solve the problem. Because election-centric imagination of democracy is deeply problematic. The constitutional meaning of democracy is different from electoral democracy. So therefore, there is a need to go back to the basics of democracy. Constitution of India is a very important political document for all of us because it gives us new possibilities to think about India afresh in a new light. And going back to Gandhi again, I think Gandhi said, and this is remarkable because this person had great courage. He said that I have every right to criticize a Muslim if he or she does anything wrong. Similarly, every Muslim has got a right to criticize me if I do anything wrong.
Absolutely.
And this is, I think, this kind of courage we really need. So as a practicing Muslim, I always tell my students that as a practicing Muslim, I have every right to criticize you as Hindu.
Absolutely. I would go much more than even the Swadharma that you spoke about. In fact, just I think yesterday or day before, I was giving a lecture in the University of York about, we're living in a moment, an extraordinary moment in human history where people around the world are choosing in larger and larger numbers leaders who are teaching us to hate. That's the reality. It's not Trump, it's not Modi. It is, and both Trump and Modi in the recent elections exposed themselves in all, there were no fig leaves at all. In all their hateful ideology was out there, and people adored them. So that's why I feel this is a moment of civilizational crisis. And I believe that, I would go much further. I feel that we need to find answers in a whole new radical imagination of our futures, at the center of which I would place fraternity. And what I said in my lecture today, and I just placed that before you, Noam Chomsky actually talked about a good society. And he said a good society is one in which we take care of each other. It's really, the more I think about it, the more, it summarizes, that's a good society, that's a good state, where we take care of each other. And it is that kind of social caring around which can we have a new imagination of our economic policies, of our climate policies, of our international relations, of our internal policies, how we live with diversity, etc., of religious freedom and all of this, around the idea that we take care of each other. How would you respond to that?
I have recently finished a book by Nivedita Menon, which is called Secularism as Misdirection. As Misdirection.
Okay.
It's a very provocative title. But the book offers a very different imagination of secularism, a constructive way to engage and to propose that actually something has, everything has not yet gone. And what is needed is to create new solidarities or bandhutva.
Yeah.
But what is important is to establish a crucial link between political processes and the economic policy processes that is happening at the moment. By the way, if you look at all the statistics, look at all the electoral statistics factually, you find that the so-called rightist turn in the world is actually not because they are very popular.
It's because the others are
they are fragmented.
So again, I want to ask you, then why do you see hope? If the political class has failed us, how will we do all the things that we spoke
Because
about?
the other meaning of politics, the other meaning of democracy, the politics that is politics of love, and the politics of the radical politics of radical love, because it is already there. What we really need is to build this up, and create an alternative. This is what we all have been doing in our everyday lives. So, obviously the Gandhi didn't know that he would be the father of nation one day. No, he started at the grassroots. So, I think we need to understand the significance of grassroots, and also without losing hope. Second, one thing is obviously we must have hope, constructive proposals, and secondly, a futuristic imagination of a good society.
So Hilal, I think, I wish we could have gone on and on. And I hope we have many occasions to continue this kind of conversation. But I think what you said at the end was really significant. Our political class may fail us. We didn't talk about it. Our business class might fail us. Educated upper caste Indians and rich Indians might fail us. But ordinary Indians will continue and preserve and hold on to what we call the idea of India.
Completely.
Inshallah, let's hope and believe. It's my belief as well.
Yes, absolutely. I believe in that something good is going to happen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Harshbhai.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Partitions of the Heart. You can find more Himal podcasts like the South Asia Review of Books and State of South Asia on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Support Himal's independent journalism by becoming a Himal patron today. We'll be back soon with another great conversation. See you then.